Chullin Daf Kuf Daled. Perek Kol Habasar, Perek Shmini. Zok the Hedek Mishum Siyata Dishmaya. It's also to cook all kinds of meat with milk, except for the meat of fish or grasshoppers. It's also to bring up all kinds of meat onto a table in which there's cheese, except for the meat of fish and grasshoppers. One who makes a neder not to eat meat may eat the meat of fish and grasshoppers. The Mishnah seems to say that even the meat of birds is also the rice to be cooked with milk. This would not follow Rabbi Akiva, who says in the Mishnah the meat of chayes and birds are not also the rice to be cooked with milk. The Mishnah also suggests that one who makes a neder not to eat meat would be also to eat the meat of birds. This seems to follow Rabbi Akiva's view in the Mishnah regarding the Dharma. The Mishnah says if someone makes a neder prohibiting vegetables, he's mutter to have squash. Rabbi Akiva says it would be also. They said to Rabbi Akiva, if a person sends a messenger to buy vegetables and he only finds squash in the market, he's going to go back to the person who sent him and say there were no vegetables, only squash, which shows that squash were not included in vegetables. Rabbi Akiva said to him, no, this shows that squash is included in vegetables, because the messenger wouldn't come back and say there were no vegetables, only beans. This shows that squash is included in the category of vegetables. So it would be Rabbi Akiva who would therefore include meat of birds in a neder not to eat meat. So how could it be that the first part of the Mishnah follows Rabban and the second part of the Mishnah follows Rabbi Akiva? So Rabbi Yosef said the Mishnah is the view of Rebbe, who holds like Rabbi Akiva regarding the Dharm, like the Rabban regarding Basav and Cholav. Second teretz, Rashi said the entire Mishnah follows the view of Rabbi Akiva. The Mishnah should be understood as saying it's also to cook all kinds of meat with milk, some which are also the raisa, and some which are also the rabbanon, except for the meat of fish or grasshoppers, which are not also the raisa or the rabbanon. Mishnah then said, "V'asur lahalois v'chulu." Rabbi Yosef said we can learn from here that meat of birds may not be cooked with milk, even the raisa. For if it would only be also the rabbanon, that would mean that eating the mixture is only also as gzera the rabbanon. So we would not make another gzera on top of that and not allow it to even be brought up on the same table as dairy products. How do we know that we may not make a gzera on top of another gzera? If the Gemara Mishnah says chal of chutz la'aretz, which only has the status of chal d'Rabbanan, may be eaten by a kohen while sitting at the same table as a non-kohen, and may even be given to a kohen who's an am ha'aretz. We see that since it's only d'Rabbanan, we're not geyser against having it on the same table as a non-kohen to prevent him from eating it. The same would be therefore true regarding basar v'chalav. Abaye said, not a good proof. If the Mishnah would say that we're not geyser for chalav chutzar that's present in Eretz Yisrael, which would be a case of not being geyser, even though it can lead to an issa deraisa, that would be a valid proof. However, when the chalav chutzar is not in Eretz Yisrael, there's no chance of it leading to an issa deraisa, and maybe that's why we don't make a gzeira. However, maybe we would be geyser against putting bird meat and dairy on the same table, even if bird meat with milk is only us drabanan, because that may lead to someone putting animal meat and dairy on the same table and eating them together, which would be also deraisa. Presumably the Mishnah is discussing where cold meat and cold dairy are placed on the same table. Eating cold meat and dairy is only a d'Rabbanan. So the Gzeira is not preventing it as a deraisa. And for the Gemara, Abaye said the Gzeira is to prevent meat and dairy in a hot pan from being placed on the same table. For the Gemara, but it's only a klisheni, which doesn't have the ability to cook, and eating the mixture would therefore only be also d'Rabbanan. And for the Gemara, the Gzeira is to prevent meat and dairy in a pan that's a kli rishon from being placed on the same table. Zok, the next Mishnah, Beis Shammai said bird meat may be put on the same table as cheese, but it may not be eaten with the cheese. Beis Hillel say it can even not be brought onto the same table, and of course cannot be eaten together. Rabbi Yossi said this is something that's among the leniencies of Beis Shammai and the stringencies of Beis Hillel. Mishnah continues the gzeira against putting them on the same table refers to a table on which people eat. However, with regard to a table used to arrange food, one may place one right next to the other without any concern. Frek Digamar. Rabbi Yossi seems to be saying the exact thing with Tanna Kama. You can't say Rabbi Yossi means to say that they even argue regarding the eating of bird meat with dairy and that Beis Shammai allow that, because the Mishnah says Rabbi Yossi explicitly says Beis Shammai allowed the bird meat and dairy to be brought up on the same table, but do not allow them to be eaten together. Rather, the Mishnah is teaching us that the Tanna Kama is Rabbi Yossi, and by telling us this, it teaches that when someone repeats something and in the name of the one who said it, it brings redemption to the world. This is based on the pasuk that says, "Atomer Esalam Melech b'Shem Mordechai." So Agra, the father-in-law of Rabbi Abba, taught a brayso that said bird meat and dairy may be eaten one after another without any concern. He then explained this means that the person need not wash his hands or wipe out his mouth in between eating one and the other. Rabbi Yitzchak the son of Rashashu was by the house of Rav Ashi, and they brought him cheese to eat, and he ate it. They then brought him meat to eat, and he ate without washing his hands in between. They asked him, based on the ruling of Agra, it's only bird meat that can be eaten after dairy without the need to wash the hands in between. He told them that's only true at night when you can't see whether your hands are still dirty from the cheeses. However, during the day, it's not necessary. Brayso says Beis Shammai say that after eating cheese, one must wipe out his mouth before eating meat. Beis Hillel say you have to rinse out your mouth. What is meant that Beis Shammai requires wiping and Beis Hillel requires rinsing? It can't mean Beis Shammai only require wiping and Beis Hillel only require rinsing, because Reb Zera says that wiping can be done with bread, and according to this, he would be explaining something something of Beis Shammai, which is not how we paskin. It also can't mean that Beis Shammai you say only wiping is needed. Beis Hillel say that rinsing is needed in addition to wiping, because then this would be an example of something else that Beis Shammai is more lenient than Beis Hillel. And therefore it should be listed in that list of things that Beis Shammai is more lenient. And rather, they both agree that wiping and rinsing must be done. It's just that each only mentioned one step in the process. Reb Zera says wiping can only be done with bread. The Gemara says this refers only to wheat bread, but barley bread would not work. Also, the wheat bread must be cold because warm bread tends to stick in the mouth. Also, finally, the bread must be soft. The Gemara paskins, wiping of the mouth can be done with any food except for flour, dates, and vegetables.